In the underworld, there were rules that mattered more than laws. Territory, money, respect. Break one, and you might recover. Break two, and you'd be warned. Break all three, and you wouldn't live long enough to regret it. In 1930s and 1940s New York, the Italian Mafia believed they had written those rules. And for the most part, they had. Except in Harlem. Harlem belonged to Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. Not because he demanded it loudly, but because he enforced it quietly. And one night, a Mafia boss forgot that. The meeting took place in a private back room of a restaurant near the edge of Harlem. Neutral ground. That was the idea. A place where business could be discussed without violence spilling into the streets. Bumpy arrived early. As always, he came alone. The Mafia boss arrived late on purpose. Power liked to make entrances. Two men followed him inside, scanning the room the way men with nothing to fear usually did. Saturday. The conversation started politely enough. Numbers. Roots. Percentages. The language of cooperation. Harlem was profitable, and the Italians knew it. They wanted more influence. More control. Bumpy listened. He always listened. Then the tone shifted. The Mafia boss leaned back in his chair, smiled thinly, and said something he thought would assert dominance. Something he'd probably said his whole life without consequence. Something that reduced Bumpy to what he thought a black man was supposed to be, no matter how much territory he controlled. The room went still. Not tense. Not explosive. Still. Bumpy didn't react immediately. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He simply looked at the man across the table, studying him as if measuring how much damage ignorance could cause. The Mafia boss chuckled, mistaking silence for weakness. That was his mistake. For the Mafia boss, the insult was casual. For Bumpy Johnson, it wasn't about emotion. It was about precedent. If that word passed without response, everything that followed would be downhill. Territory would shrink. Respect would erode. Harlem would become a place others felt free to disrespect openly. Bumpy had spent decades preventing that exact outcome. He had gone to prison. He had buried friends. He had negotiated peace when war was easier. Not to be spoken to like he didn't belong in the room. This wasn't about pride. It was about order. Bumpy understood something the Mafia boss did not. Power wasn't maintained by how loud you were, it was maintained by what you allowed. And Bumpy Johnson allowed very little. Bumpy leaned forward slightly. Not aggressively. Not threateningly. Just enough to signal that the conversation had changed. He looked directly at the Mafia boss and spoke calmly, quiet enough that only the table heard him. 6 words. No shouting. No insults. No profanity. Just a statement of fact, delivered with certainty. The room changed instantly. The boss stopped smiling. One of the men behind him shifted uncomfortably. The other looked away. They all understood what those 6 words meant, not emotionally, but structurally. Bumpy wasn't threatening violence. He was explaining consequences. Consequences that wouldn't be loud. Wouldn't be immediate. But would be permanent. The Mafia boss opened his mouth to respond, then thought better of it. Because suddenly, this wasn't a conversation about dominance. It was a calculation about survival. No one spoke for several seconds. In that silence, the Mafia boss realized something unsettling. Bumpy Johnson wasn't asking for respect. He was informing him of the cost of disrespect. And the cost wasn't a fight. It was exclusion. Roots drying up. Contacts going silent. Protection disappearing when it was needed most. The kinds of losses that never made headlines but destroyed careers. Finally, the Mafia boss stood. He didn't apologize. Men like him rarely did. But he didn't repeat himself either. That mattered. The meeting ended early. No handshakes. No threats. Just a quiet understanding that something irreversible had occurred. After that night, things changed. Not dramatically. Not publicly. But decisively. The Mafia stopped pressing Harlem. Meetings became rare. Demands softened into requests. Eventually, even those stopped. It wasn't because Bumpy Johnson was violent. It was because he was predictable. Predictable in one crucial way. Disrespect was never left uncorrected. The Mafia didn't fear Bumpy Johnson's temper. They feared his patience. They feared the way he could wait years to balance a scale. The way he could isolate without attacking. The way he could make a territory feel suddenly unavailable. So they stayed away. And Harlem stayed Harlem. History often reduces men like Bumpy Johnson to stereotypes. Gangster. Criminal. Violent. But moments like this reveal something more complicated. That night, 6 words prevented years of bloodshed. No gun was drawn. No threat was shouted. No body hit the floor. Yet an entire power structure adjusted its behavior. Because real power isn't about domination. It's about boundaries. And when a Mafia boss crossed one of Bumpy Johnson's boundaries, he didn't respond with chaos. He responded with clarity. 6 words. And the Mafia never forgot them.